Good morning, everyone. I'm Alex Coulter, Director of the National Centre for Creative Health. A warm welcome to our 5th roundtable for the Creative Health Review on education and training, creativity for health and wellbeing in the education system. The roundtables are in Zoom webinar format, which means we can't see our audience. Over 150 people have signed up for today's event. Please do say who you are in the chat and chat to each other in the chat. Please put any questions for the speakers into the Q&A box, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to ask your question to a specific speaker, please say who that is. And if you have any technical concerns, please put them in the chat and we will try and help. The National Centre for Creative Health and the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Arts, Health and Wellbeing's Creative Health Review aims to highlight the potential for creative health to tackle pressing issues in health and social care and more widely, including health inequalities and the additional challenges we face as we recover from COVID-19. We have a panel of commissioners with a wide breadth of expertise, and they will help us translate the findings from the review into recommendations for policymakers to encourage and inform the development of a cross-governmental strategy for creative health. I'm delighted to say that one of our commissioners, Baroness Estelle Morris of Yardley, is going to chair this roundtable. Baroness Morris started her career as a teacher in an inner-city multiracial comprehensive school where she taught for 18 years. She then became MP for Birmingham Yardley and was appointed Secretary of State in the Department for Education in 2002, followed by 2 years as Minister at the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. She has been a member of the House of Lords since 2005. She is chair of the Birmingham Education Partnership, trustee of the Poetry Archive, and a director of the Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra, who are also joining us today as speakers. Thank you, Estelle.
Thank you very much, and my welcome to everyone as well. I think it's going to be a good session on a very important topic, and I'm looking forward to hearing the contributions. I was asked to start off by saying something about the importance of creativity for health and well-being. And in a way, I think the best way of, in my mind, of explaining that is I've never heard anyone argue for a society that's got no creativity as part of it. I've never heard anybody say my ideal world would be one where there is no creativity. And if you look around the world at successful, cohesive societies with high levels of well-being, creativity and the arts and culture flourishes. And I think that's a bit of an anomaly in our country. We know in our hearts that it's a good thing, and yet we're not active enough in making sure that we do it as best as possible and make sure that it's available to everyone. I sometimes think that we almost pocket it as a given and forget that sometimes you have to put a lot of effort and a lot of thought into making sure that things can continue. And like everything else, if something's good and you want it to be part of someone's life and you think it's important as a citizen, as a member of society, as a being on this earth, well, then you have to start very early with young children and make sure that they've got the opportunities to develop those skills. And again, I've never talked to anybody who's any involvement in schools who says we ought not to be doing that. Creativity is a bad thing. Music's not right to happen in schools. Children shouldn't do drama or art or dance. And yet when you go around schools, a lot of the conversation is about creativity being squeezed out of the system. So I think the paradox we've got in some ways is no one is against creativity. Everyone understands it's essential to our health and well-being. We all want it to flourish, but somehow we've not put those mechanisms in place and we've not stated our priorities strongly enough and acted on them sufficiently to make sure that creativity is embedded in everything we do, right from when children are born, through those years of compulsory schooling, which will equip them to make their own decisions about the part that creativity can play in their lives as they get older. But I know what we've got today is a group of people who are going to make short presentations on their work, on how they are succeeding in that. This is the last point I'll make. The other strange thing is I'm one who talks a lot about creativity being squeezed out of education. And then I go to a school and I see wondrous things happening. And somehow we've not even got that conversation right. We need as much talk about the good things that are happening as we do about the barriers to make sure there's more of it in all schools. And I think my summary of that would be, there's exceptionally good things happening, but we are nowhere near making those exceptional things available to every child and every young person in our country today. So I think we're going to hear lots of good examples, and I'm looking forward to both the presentations and the debate and your questions after that. And we'll now start, if I can call upon Sally Bacon OBE, who's the founder member and co-chair of the Cultural Learning Alliance, has done so much to raise this particular issue to the top of people's agenda. Sally, thank you.
Thank you, Estelle. That's a perfect introduction. And to Alan for the invitation. As well as being co-chair of the Cultural Learning Alliance, I'm currently working on a startup fund specifically focused on the arts for health and wellbeing for 14 to 19-year-olds. And for the past 15 months, I've been working on a Gulbenkian Foundation report looking at the arts in schools over the past 40 years, following on from their seminal Arts in Schools report in 1982. What we've learnt, what we've lost along the way, and what needs to change. Our top level finding is that access to the arts in schools can no longer be assumed in either the primary or secondary system. Arts confident head teachers and multi-academy trusts can still offer a sound arts education. And as Estelle said, brilliant work does happen, but the odds are stacked against this as they battle with a focus on accountability measures which do not value the arts. We have 3 central conclusions for this report, which is published on the 30th of March, which I'll share here to set the context for what I'm about to say about the arts for health and well-being in England's education system. The first is that, as we all know, art subjects and experiences make a positive and evidence difference to learning and to personal outcomes for young people, providing them with skills for life and skills for work. However, there's a lack of value ascribed to them within the state education system in England, in which they are devalued and downgraded due to accountability measures that exclude them, and by a system that is focused on exam success as opposed to whole child development. And finally, England's schooling system is running on outdated policies without a clear purpose for what schools are equipping young people with or why. Our analysis of the arts in schools within this wider context has enabled us to show why change is necessary and how it is possible. One of our central points is that in the pursuit of accountability measures focused on testing, exam outcomes and Ofsted, the system has lost sight of education for the whole child, for personal development and health and well-being, and lost sight of education for now. Perhaps one of the most challenging issues we encountered in our review, through which we consulted with about 300 people through a series of conversations and roundtables, was the pressing need for schools to address young people's social and personal issues. Among many other benefits, the power of creative exploration and expression through the arts should be central in helping to address the current crisis in young people's mental health. We know that the arts can provide a creative outlet which enables children to explore and express their emotions and their identities, and which can support their well-being. We describe the arts as full spectrum subjects in developing attributes and capacities ranging from self-confidence and empathy to collaboration, critical thinking, and creative freedom. Throughout our roundtables, including with a youth panel, we heard a great deal about mental health, often linked with the demands put on young people to achieve educational outcomes, and a school environment where the system has defaulted to meeting accountability criteria. In a complex, changing world and in the face of increasing mental health challenges, giving children the space and skills to express themselves in and through all art forms as a way to understand themselves, others, and the world around them is a key aspect of a child's right to a rich education. This means that other metrics beyond academic attainment need to be considered. The new Welsh education system has a broader approach with 4 purposes. The aim of the Welsh schools curriculum is to support its children and young people to become ambitious, capable learners, enterprising creative contributors, ethical, informed citizens of Wales and the world, and healthy, confident individuals, ready to lead fulfilling lives as valued members of society. We suggest that Wales provides a valuable starting point for consideration of the purposes at the heart of England's system. In order to ensure access to the benefits of arts subjects, we need a broader and more balanced curriculum, one that equips young people for the present as well as for the future, and with a new area of learning, the expressive arts, set alongside other curriculum areas of study, all of which are equal in status and aligned to clear purposes. Many of the problems we identify in the new report are as much about the wider context in which learning takes place as about the specific challenges for the arts and creativity in schools. We were writing the report at a time of great social and political change, when young people are facing significant challenges. As a country, we've arrived at a knowledge-centered approach to learning, which has failed to embrace the value of the arts on a personal level to young people, and has prioritized learning to count over learning to create. We would argue that this now has to change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's given a really good background and some really good facts and figures from which to base the other presentations. Thank you very much indeed, Sally. Our next presenters are twosome here, two people, the same project, and it's Zoe Armfield, who's the head of learning at the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic, and Sarah Williams, who is head teacher at Faith Primary Academy, one of the first schools in Liverpool to work on the In Harmony project with the Royal Phil. And they are fresh from the success of their 14th birthday celebrations, which was the Everton Children's Orchestra and the Armfield Children's Orchestra, who played on the stage yesterday to a packed audience of thousands, I would imagine, at the Royal Phil. It was a really good afternoon. So thank you for being with us, Zoe and Sarah, and I'll hand over to you.
Good morning. Thanks, Estelle. Great to see everyone. I'm really happy to be here. So I've got a short PowerPoint that I'm going to give just to give a bit of a background of what In Harmony Liverpool is. And I'm then going to hand over to Sarah to talk a little bit more from the school's perspective of how it's working for them. I'm just going to share my screen. So let's hope this works okay. Okay, can you see the slides there? Great. So I'm Zoe and I'm head of learning, as Estelle said, at Liverpool Philharmonic, and we are the biggest music organisation in Liverpool. Our mission is to enhance and transform lives through music, and we do that through three specific strands of work. So firstly, we have our orchestra. We have the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra, which is the oldest professional symphony orchestra in the UK. We also have our world-class concert hall, Liverpool Philharmonic Hall, along with our second smaller venue music room, which hosts a wide range of classical, rock, pop, comedy, film, spoken word, and roots gigs. Our third strand is our award-winning extensive learning programme, which has a wide range of participatory and engaging projects reaching over 100,000 children and adults across our city region. We deliver the largest music and health NHS programme, now in its 15th year, as well as running extensive talent development schemes and ensembles and supporting music education across the city region. And it's our flagship music education programme that I'm here to talk about today, In Harmony Liverpool, which, as Estelle said, is now in its 14th year of life-changing orchestral music making with the children and families of North Liverpool. Our vision through In Harmony is a healthier, higher achieving future for North Liverpool. So how do we do that? We use orchestral music making to improve the life chances of children by increasing confidence, well-being, skills and resilience, enhanced by opportunities to learn, perform, travel and collaborate with professional musicians, international artists and other young people. In Harmony is targeted at children with the greatest need and fewest resources. Over 40% of the children on our programme are classed as living in poverty. At least 25% of children at In Harmony schools have a special educational need compared to a national average of 16.6%. Over 1,650 children and young people aged 0 to 18 take part in orchestral music making every single week, free of charge, in and out of school. We partner with 4 primary and nursery schools across Armfield and Everton, where music is embedded across the curriculum for every single child. Musicianship is the core part of their first musical learning from early years through Key Stage 1, using a song-based curriculum, developing communication, speech and language skills, and inspiring a love of music through the listening curriculum and performances for families. Children then learn orchestral instruments from Key Stage 2, continuing with musicianship lessons to underpin their instrumental learning. Creativity is threaded through the curriculum, with children creating and composing their own music and songs from the early ages. And finally, performance is at the heart of the programme, with every child sharing their achievements every single term for families in school and annually at Liverpool Philharmonic Hall once in Year 5. Children continue their learning at our extracurricular youth hubs once they're at secondary school, based in various community venues and secondary schools in the area. This reaches a new group of children from across the area who join the programme at Year 7. They enhance their musical learning through additional after-school activity and talent development opportunities, including progressing into Liverpool Philharmonic Youth Company and accessing national opportunities such as the National Orchestras for All and National Children's Orchestra. The programme is fully inclusive. Every single child in every school takes part, supporting all children, any with special educational needs, through one-to-one provision with an SEN teaching assistant, along with tailored musical parts, music and activities and instruments, as well as additional child-led musical workshops in the early years. The programme impacts the whole community through the work with the children, with families attending performances by their children, accessing free and heavily discounted tickets to events at Liverpool Philharmonic Hall, and free drop-in baby and parent sessions. Community weeks see children and musicians performing in supermarkets, laundrettes, care homes, and in the children's own homes. Since the programme began in 2009, we've developed 8 core principles with our communities and partners that we are continuously refining and reviewing. I'm going to post them here, but I'm not going to read them all out just because of time. Obviously, we'll share the slides after, but what we are really clear on is that the principles of In Harmony and its outcomes, which I'll come to shortly, are completely reflective of the Marmot Review recommendations from 2010, addressing health inequalities and the social determinants of health. So what we now know, after having worked in these communities since 2009, through our evaluation framework and all the data monitoring that we've done, is that the programme has improved the life chances of children and young people, with outcomes including increased confidence, well-being, skills, aspiration and resilience. It has positively impacted on families and family life, developing social and cultural capital and generating pride. It has positively impacted on the culture and learning environment of the participating schools. And through long-term partnerships, In Harmony has built stronger communities, generating civic pride, hope, and aspiration. We do this through a long-term commitment to our communities, focusing on the most disadvantaged children and families, and by making music a normal part of community life. And it's this that's unique about In Harmony. It is a long-term neighbourhood level intervention, working in partnership with schools, children's centres, NHS, public sector and community organisations in areas of historical disadvantage to address and alleviate long-term health, education and social inequality through positive activities for young people. We equip children and young people at a community-wide level with the skills and confidence to make active choices that will determine their future life chances and prosperity, and with the resilience and positive well-being to succeed in employment or whatever they do with their lives. So to end, I'd just like to include a few words from one of our young people. This is Phoebe. She was 9 when In Harmony started back in 2009. She took part on her double bass until she was 17. She spoke at our 10th birthday celebrations in the Houses of Commons in 2019. And this is what she said. It gave me the confidence, self-belief and ambition that I can achieve amazing things if I focus myself and realise that with a lot of hard work, I will be where I want to be. Many people overlook young people like us from our areas. However, we are more than capable of achieving amazing things, especially when we have things like In Harmony in our lives. I've got a short video that I didn't have time to show, so I'm going to post that in the chat after. But for now, I'd like to hand over. I'm going to stop sharing my screen if I can. And I'm going to hand over to Sarah Williams, who is the head teacher of Faith Primary Academy. She is going to talk a little bit about what it's like having In Harmony in her school. Let me just stop sharing here. There we go.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, everybody, for having me here this morning. I'm very privileged to attend the roundtable. Speaking from a school perspective, as Estelle mentioned before, I'm Sarah Williams. I'm the head teacher at Faith Primary School, which was one of the first primary schools to become involved with the In Harmony programme. And I often get asked the question, why do we do it and what do we benefit from it? And I think most people anticipate the more obvious answer, which is we're giving children the opportunity to learn to play an instrument. And we may find talent in that. And the fact that children may possibly go on to pursue that either as a career or as a hobby later in life. But actually, the less obvious but more important answer is one of mental health and well-being and the skills that children learn through doing something like in Harmony. I think Sally made a really good point before when she said it's about teaching the whole child and learning not teaching to count, but teaching to create. And I think that's a very, very important quote, which I think I'll steal, Sally, thank you very much, and use in the future. The thing is, I've noticed that the skills that our children gain from being part of this programme are things like resilience, determination, confidence, self-esteem. We are actually a school with a very high proportion of SEND children. We've got a very mixed and diverse range of children coming into our school. And we've noticed that, particularly over the latter years, there are skills that perhaps as adults we take for granted that our children just do not possess, and they have to be taught this. And they have to be taught this in a school setting. And one of the best ways to do that is through enabling them to be creative. Lots of our children struggle with things like sensory processing. They have difficulty with working memory. That's the ability to follow multiple instructions or to retain information. This is actually getting worse over time. The other thing is self-regulation. A lot of children are coming into school across the country that are unable to identify emotion. They are unable to identify how they feel, why they feel it, what their trigger might be, and how to regulate themselves when they are not feeling excellent that day. And music is definitely a great vehicle for actually teaching the children to express themselves, to regulate, and all those wider skills like teamwork and collaboration, having empathy with others. Also things like feeling nervous, and that's okay. When you're going to go on stage, it's normal to feel nervous. How do we tackle that? What types of things can we do? Honestly, all the things that In Harmony brings, there is no way as a head teacher I would be able to deliver anywhere near the quality of curriculum without the programme. The curriculum, as we said before, is so jam-packed full of all types of different things, and we do have to look at the academic as well. But the skill set that these musicians bring to our setting is beyond compare. We as teachers, we teach every subject, but we are not masters like they are in that particular field, and their passion and drive and delivery of that really influences the children. I think it's essential for creativity to be part of the curriculum and fully embedded throughout the curriculum as well, because it's essential for our society. We do not want young people to reach adulthood and not be able to express themselves and to go about society with compassion and empathy and resilience and determination. It's about making sure that we are teaching that whole child and that they will develop into positive contributors in the long run. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you both to Zoe and Sarah for that really very good insight into what's going on in Liverpool. Thank you. Excellent. I'm now going to turn to Professor Nicola Walshe, who's Pro-Director at the Institute of Education. And we very often ask, what's the evidence? Or we can see the evidence, but other people say, well, shows the papers, shows the research. So it's really important that we do have people who are taking on that and research in this area. And Nicola has been doing exactly that and is going to present to us now. So thank you very much, Nicola. I'll hand over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you. It's really interesting already to hear about the work of colleagues so far. I'm just going to share my screen as well and talk a little bit about a specific project. As Estelle mentioned, providing some of the evidence that we're talking about that will hopefully sort of contribute to some of the debate today and beyond in affect and change with policy. So what I'm going to talk about in particular is two projects funded by the UKRI, which look at arts in nature practice within school context. So looking at the arts, but also how that combines with nature to support children's mental health and well-being. It'll be quite a whistle-stop tour, but I will put some links in the chat as well in relation to our website and some videos as well, in case you want further information, including some of the papers. So first of all, the project that we first started looking at was called Eco Capabilities, and it was drawing really on three concerns. First of all, a concern for what is really a crisis in mental health and well-being in children and young people that we're all sort of very familiar with. Secondly, a concern around disconnect children to disconnect from nature and the environment. And from my perspective, with my other hat on, I'm Executive Director of the UCL Centre for Climate Change and Sustainability Education. So thinking about how we can educate children and young people around environmental and sustainability climate change issues. And of course, concern about disconnection from nature, particularly of children from disadvantaged areas. So things like green poverty is a real concern in that area as well. And then the third thing is a concern for marginalisation of the arts within school curricula, which we've already talked around today. So those three pillars really brought together eco capabilities. And we went into, with project partners, Cambridge Curiosity and Imagination, you can see there on the right hand side their logo, and they've been really fundamental in the partnership throughout the two research projects I'm describing, going into primary schools, into sort of children of year 4 and year 5 in areas of high disadvantage in East Anglia, and undertaking a day a week for 8 consecutive weeks of arts in nature practice with those children and young people. I've got some information I'll share about that more specifically in terms of what we did, but that was very much focused, as I say, with the artists leading that practice. And there were considerable impact that showed on the children. So the practice itself developed 8 eco capabilities, as we've described those. They could be skills, competencies, so autonomy, so confidence. They were much more aware of their own bodies and how they interacted in those spaces. They developed individuality, their own sort of identities, if you like, mental and emotional well-being, relationships with each other, that's the human and non-human environment, so relationships with nature, they started to take much more care and notice nature much more. They developed their senses, they noticed more, as I say, it was a very embodied arts experiences, so not just sort of visual arts, but also drama, music within those spaces, and spirituality, and you can read more about that. But more importantly for this, children's well-being was improved by the development of self-confidence, self-esteem, agency, slowness and calmness. They took time to reflect on how they felt and connectedness with nature. And children felt happier with their lives and were more optimistic about what the future holds for them. But of course, that's a very difficult sort of practice to replicate for all schools. All schools can't currently afford an artist to come in for a full day a week to work with children. So we wanted to think about how we could scale up that practice. And this was the Branching Out project, part of the UKRI funded Tackling Mental Health Inequalities in Schools with what we called community artscapers. So we were looking at how CCI and the new project partners for this as well with Full Scope, who look at mental health and wellbeing as a charity organisation within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, could adapt their practice to allow wider impact across more school contexts using what we termed community artscapers, so volunteers that we train to go into schools and work with smaller groups of children on a weekly basis for 8 weeks, again in a slightly different way. We also wanted to look at setting up sustainable partnerships across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So how do we work within the school sector, but across local authorities, NHS trusts, and the voluntary community and social enterprise sector to provide a model for stakeholder engagement at a national level. So how can we scale up that using this really cross-professional, multi-professional approach and provide toolkits for stakeholders to support the Scale Up Implementations programme. And we undertook a range of research around that, working with schools, so teachers doing sending out questionnaires. We also sent out questionnaires to arts and nature organisations, so to understand their practice across the UK. And also we did a pilot with 6 schools looking at this community artscape model with those 6 schools. And we found, these are the sort of very high level findings, that the community artscape model was deemed acceptable and appropriate by over 95% of respondents who are teachers, SENCOs, inclusion leads within schools. So they thought this was a really positive model. Artscaping had a positive impact, so artscaping is the arts and nature practice of CCI, on children's confidence, relationships, happiness, creativity, and these are reported by the teachers with them. Adults' confidence as well, so it wasn't just the children that were benefiting, it was the teachers, the teaching assistants, the volunteers who were involved that also benefited in terms of their mental health, well-being, their confidence. And really importantly, this identified a need from our perspective for more and better professional development for teachers, support for schools to engage community artscapers to provide capacity to embed artscaping practice, so using the community to help the school to embed this sort of practice in schools. And also we argue greater attention to multi-agency level working, so working not just with schools, but actually bringing together health, social care, education colleagues to embed arts and nature practice into schools and communities at scale. As I say, That's a really quick whistle-stop tour. I'll put some links in the chat, but I did just want to finish with a couple of quotes. First of all, from a Year 5 child, who I always love to bring in their voices: "Being in nature, you're free to explore and have fun. You have no limits." And it really does impact their own well-being in the way they think about their own mental health, as well as their relationship with nature and the arts. But also, I think importantly, what a head teacher in one of the schools from Branching Out that talks about the way that this project has made them think differently about mental health support. It doesn't always have to be something that's gone through referral processes that relies on external agencies and huge amounts of fundings. So really, this sort of model is really rethinking how we approach mental health, which of course is a crisis within schools, and finding different ways of mobilizing community assets to support children and young people. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Nicola. That's excellent. That brought a really different perspective. I love the last quote from the head teacher. She just felt as though she had some control over the situation again. And although it won't solve everything, it does give her another string to her bow. So thank you very much for that. That's very informative. And we're now going to go on to Yogesh Datani, who's the head of Ealing Music Hub. We're all familiar with Music Hubs, and I know there's some questions in the chat on Music Hubs as well. So I'm sure it's something that will come up again during the meeting. But now I'll hand over to Yogesh and look forward to hearing from him. Thank you.
Oh, I didn't put myself on, I didn't unmute myself. Thanks, Estelle. Good morning, everyone. My thanks to Hannah Waterson for inviting me. I'm really privileged to be here. I'm going to talk about the creativity in education as a tool for health and well-being for children and young people, indeed adults as well, in the context of inclusion in the recently published National Plan for Music Education. And so I'm going to start off with two premises. I'm going to ask you all to accept two things, one of which has already been amplified by Estelle, which is that music is good for children and young people, and previously children and young people, us, and it's healthy for children and young people and us. And the second premise is that Music Hub professionals, in my view, are the most creative, resilient, and the most committed individuals that I've ever come across. And it's one reason why I work in music education, and delighted to be running the hub in Ealing. So what does the national plan say, or my view? I mean, it's 88 pages of the delightful reading if you're stuck for things to do of an evening. But these are my 5 takeaways. It's aspirational. It's going down from 118 hubs to 42. It's really challenging in many, many ways, including partnering with lead schools. There's a lot of change. And as we know, that change is something that we perhaps are quite reticent about. But actually, once we've made the change, you know, we think, oh my God, why did we not make that change before? It's very innovative. It asks for example, 4 centers of excellence in CPD, inclusion, pathways into industry, that's something I'm really excited about, and music technology. It's also very responsive. The government has announced £25 million for new instruments and equipment. So notice the emphasis on equipment, because a lot of children with SEND can't use conventional instruments, so we can buy equipment with that as well. Absolutely spot on. And last but not least, inclusion, which is what the emphasis is my emphasis today. I actually counted the number of times that inclusion appeared. I think it was over 80. So the government is really keen on inclusion, which is absolutely fantastic. We need to include everybody in a music education, not just the ones that are going to be able to afford a good music education without Music Hub. So I think that's very key. What are the challenges? I've mentioned £25 million, but that's for a particular area. Funding is in my view, going to be a challenge to achieve everything. Our funding equates to just over £8 per child per year. You can't buy a pizza for that. So that is a challenge. And yes, whilst we're very entrepreneurial as well, My service, the ratio of grant and earned income in my hub is about 45% to 55%. There are other hubs in more wealthy areas in London for whom the grant accounts for only 9%. So, you know, we're very entrepreneurial, but however, 10 years of the effect of inflation, you know, we're really struggling. So that's going to be a challenge. But we're very grateful for the grant for the next, you know, until 2030. Availability of excellent practitioners. Everybody, we've not been allowed to jump on a plane, and now what do? We want to jump on a plane. Similarly, everybody wants to play a musical instrument. Hurrah! And the challenge of that is actually finding the excellent practitioners that we need. I think the third challenge is that its engagement with the Music Hub is still non-statutory. And finally, what role do I feel that Ealing Music Hub can play? I have one of the most diverse forces in the country, and also musical offer. I have everything from the guitar to the gamelan, and from tabla to my instrument, tabla. Tabla to taiko. Tabla is my instrument. Equity, diversity, and inclusion is close to my heart, and entrepreneurialism. It's something I enjoyed. If I wasn't running a hub, I'd be an accountant of some description. God forbid now, I'm thinking. But yeah, that's something that I really enjoy. And so, yeah, those are those sort of wrap up my thoughts on the National Plan for Music Education and how it can be a force for good for everybody, not just a few. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Yogesh. And I was very grateful for that update, because music hubs have been around a long time, but the title has stayed the same, but the activities and the framework has changed a lot. So I was very, very welcome to have that update and what the work that you're doing in Ealing. And we're now going to hear from Alex Evans, who's Arts Director and CEO of Kazoo Arts, who focus on a particular group of children, because the work that they do is trauma-informed approach with the arts to support young people who are facing particularly challenging circumstances. So Alex, thank you very much, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers so far and those yet to speak. It's a great privilege to be here. I'm just going to share my screen, so I hope that you are able to see the Kazoo Arts logo, big and bright. Okay, yeah, hi, my name's Alex and I'm the Artistic Director of Kazoo Arts. We are a small charitable arts organisation based in Bethnal Green, and we work across London and nationally to support children and young people at times in their life when they are most in need of support. Our projects currently take place in hospitals, supporting children and young people with physical and mental ill health. We work in pupil referral units and alternative provisions for students who've been excluded from mainstream education, which is what I'll be talking into a little bit in the next few minutes that I have. We also work extensively across the refugee, asylum-seeking and undocumented people's populations, working in partnership with community organisations to support young refugees and asylum seekers to regulate from the stress of the experience of being displaced and persecuted. We also work within mainstream primary schools, supporting children and young people who have speech and language and communication needs using drama. Since 2018, we've been on a trauma-informed journey, which means that we've been integrating knowledge and research and development from a range of different perspectives to build an organizational approach which we believe is trauma-informed. And these are the 4 areas in which we feel that we're most able to make the biggest impact. So our approach for every piece of work that we do with children and young people and the professionals that we support to deliver the work, we use the creative arts. We're a multidisciplinary arts organisation. We understand that relationships are the perfect ground for transformational change. So we embody positive and healthy relationships throughout our work. We understand the impact of trauma from a neuroscientific perspective. We understand the impact of trauma from a sociological perspective too. So we're working in a biopsychosocial approach to integrate learning and knowledge from a range of different areas, including affective neuroscience, polyvagal theory, embodied approaches, And so we're integrating this into a practice which over the last 6 years it has supported the charity to develop more resilient and appropriate work for the settings that we're working in. One of those settings that I'm going to focus on is a pupil referral unit, otherwise known as an alternative provision. And we know from the Timpson Review, the incredible work of No More Exclusions, the Institute of Race Relations, that children and young people who are excluded from school are experiencing a significant rupture to secure attachments that they may have. But those school exclusions for children and young people are falling upon some pretty alarming lines. We see that children and young people who have special educational needs, which are not classified, are more likely to be excluded from school. We see that children and young people are excluded from school along racial lines, so more minoritized and marginalized communities, and children and young people are more likely to be identified as somebody who needs to be excluded from their secondary or primary school. We see children and young people who are looked after children or on a children in need plan are more likely to be excluded from their school, and that their school exclusion can be experienced as a significant trauma within itself. And we look at the children and young people and we see what their life circumstances have been. And we understand that if a child or a young person has experienced a trauma from being excluded from school, they can experience that as too much, too soon, too much for too long, or not enough for too long. The experience of trauma can be pervasive and can mean a disconnection for that child from their education system and the relationships around them. So our approach is to place relationships first. We know that relationships harm, but we also know that relationships heal, and that creativity is a very important way of building up the resilience needed to be able to connect to peers, to be able to have a sense of ourselves, to be able to create self-expression, feel safe, and engage in learning. So we see creativity inside pupil referral units and alternative provisions as a vital protective factor to support a child or young person through adverse experiences. So what does that look like for us in the work that we deliver? We've developed a model where we go into pupil referral units weekly across the academic year. Children and young people need consistent, structured, boundaried relationships in order to build the conditions for safety and trust. We currently are working with children and young people aged 12 to 16 from key stage 3 and 4, so that's year 10 and 11, as well as year 9. We have been working with young women in small caucus groups facilitated by young women, with boys and with mixed gender groups. And we support children and young people with non-binary identities and transgender children and young people to identify with groups where they feel most safe and identifiable. Those are small group interventions. We usually work up to about 10 young people, usually averaging around about 3 or 4. Well, actually as low as 3 or 4, up to 10. And we place artists in that school for over the year so that the children and young people are able to develop a consistent relationship. They develop a relationship with artists, and through the relationship with artists, they are able then to be able to develop relationships to other staff members within the school, whether that's teaching assistants or classroom teachers too. We have a multidisciplinary approach, so you can see a range of the different things that we put on offer, and we support children and young people to make choices about what they would like to do, where their creative interests lie, and then we resource the artists to be able to develop those skills or draw upon the skills that they already have to be able to meet the creative needs of the children and young people. This is now supporting us to develop a range of work where we're working with children and young people who've been excluded from their primary school, children as young as 7 years old, having a rupture to their attachments and their sense of safety. And so we're now working with a Birman school, working with children in key stage 1 and 2 to develop Afrobeats, dance, visual arts, and drama to support self-regulation skills, peer relationships. And then I've just put together a few recommendations here on this slide. If we're really going to be able to do this work, we need consistent funding for long-term partnerships across arts education sectors. We need to be able to resource the trauma-informed ways of working to support creative and systemic approaches so we can share values in arts organisations and education organisations and come together to be able to deliver projects which work for children and young people. I would like us to maximize on student voice and youth voice, ensuring that participants are able to steer the projects, express their own agency, their sense of control, so that they may be able to experience that sense of safety, which is so vital for learning and for experience and joy. And also for us to be able to really focus on accessible evaluative activity and monitoring. So much of our monitoring and evaluation has come from the Rosenberg self-esteem scale, which is not necessarily accessible for a student who potentially has special educational needs. So there does need to be some work around how we support children and young people to be able to reflect on where they're at and where they see themselves going. That's all that I have time for. I've actually gone over my time. You'll be able to find out all about our projects on our website. If you looked under our approach, if you looked under build, or if you looked under amplify, which is our trauma-informed approach for youth voice work. So thank you very much for allowing me to take up some of your time today.
Thanks, Alex. And I'm not sure you did go over time. Got a lot of feedback at the moment on the. Is that better? Okay, that's great. And my experience in education is it's the people in pupil referral units and special needs that get left out of any major initiative that's going on. So it was really, really good to hear the work that you're doing in that area and putting it at the forefront. Thanks very much indeed. And we've now got another joint presentation by Martin Wilson and Heather Corlett, who've been leading schools-based dance interventions in the North East. And they're going to discuss that. Martin is the Programme Director of TinArts and Heather is the Programme Lead for the North East and North Cumbria Child Health and Wellbeing Network. So I'm now handing over to Martin and Heather. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Heather is going to start away. If it's okay to PowerPoint up there.
Thank you, that's fabulous. We're honoured to be here as part of this whistle stop tour alongside some of these nationally amazing examples. So thank you very much for having us. I'm going to set the context and then Martin's going to share our STAR project. And we're delighted to be here. We're representing the Child Health and Wellbeing Network in the North East and North Cumbria. It's the largest ICB, which is an integrated care board in the country, and it's got some of the highest levels of deprivation, which is a wider determinant of health, and as I'm sure you all know, impacts the possible health outcomes of the young people we serve up in the North East and North Cumbria. So we came together to create a network from across the system and to see what we could do about these poor outcomes. And up here you can see our vision and the mission that we were given. So the vision sets the context of our network, that we want to improve and connect with partners across our organisation to enable more young people to thrive. And they were very clear on the purpose and how they wanted us to do that. And you can see there, share good practice, drive work forward and connect us to different groups. And this project is an example of how we're connecting health, schools, public health and arts and creativity. So these are our priorities, and you'll see at the centre are children and young people, and we've just heard the previous speaker speaking about the importance of co-production. Children and young people are at the heart of what we do, and these network priorities were given to us by the system, over 1,000 professionals and children and young people themselves. So it defines our work programme and it gives us a legitimate purpose. And you can see there, mental health was our highest priority that was given to us by the system. Poverty was the second highest, and you can see arts and creativity in the bottom right. Thanks, Martin.
So if I talk a little bit about. Oh, I'm sorry. I do have a massive echo myself, so I'll keep talking and hopefully that won't be too distracting. The South Tees Arts Project, it's a dance project, and I am director of a dance organisation in Durham, collaborating with the network, as well as we could have thrown up a page of all the logos of all the partners involved, and it's quite a high number. So it was much more of a confusing image. But this is about people coming together. So this is about developing the South Tees Arts Project as a collaborative project. It was evidence-based. So we'd been looking at other research and other learning from dance projects about how the physical and mental well-being benefits of that and how that engages. But also massively in terms of the network, we looked at the family support priority. And this is about not only taking the young person on a journey, but taking the family unit with that to sustain and to ensure we're connecting with the family and not just isolating the child in school, and that there then is a disconnect between school and family life. And the 5 points down the bottom just very quickly capture what STAR was all about. Dance Arts is delivering weekly in schools, in 2 primary schools with year 1s and year 5s. It included visits to the theatre as a point of inspiration at the start for the young people, and then at the end to celebrate their achievements across the year-long programme. The family support and link workers were wrapping around the family unit and connecting the schoolwork back to the home life and making sure there was the themes were going between and wrapping around. Holiday workshops to make sure that when we got to those periods when young people suffer from holiday hunger or isolation, that we were able to help the school with the bridging of that, so there's continuity. And then we had 4 universities from across the northeast and Yorkshire who undertook the research evaluation. And in a little bit, I'm going to talk more about the research, but Heather can kind of relate how this STAR relates back to the network itself.
Thanks, Martin. So why STAR? So we developed our network in 2019, and the Baroness in the opening speech clearly articulated how the benefits of creative work is to health. It's a no-brainer, but why isn't it there then? Why don't we do it? So we needed some drivers and the context within which we're working on to enable us to develop the STAR project. So some of the network drivers I've already mentioned. Mental health and poverty were the highest priorities that the system gave us to work on. So they wanted us to focus in that area. They'd already highlighted that arts and creativity should be a cross-cutting theme. And you remember the mission that we were given was to drive work forward. So the next one is, I just want to highlight some of the poverty levels in our area so you can appreciate them. So in 2020, 8 out of the top 10 local authorities with the sharpest rise in child poverty were in the northeast. This was led by Middlesbrough, with over 41% of children were living in poverty in 2018 to 19, and that was before the impact of COVID. So then in 2021, the northeast overtook London to have the highest rate of poverty in the UK at 38%, and that equates to 11 children out of every class of 30 is living in poverty. And in Middlesbrough, they do report that it's a higher statistic to die of a heroin overdose than a road traffic accident. So that kind of gives you the context that we were in. And then the third bullet at the bottom there, the importance of culture and creativity. We learned from some other initiatives, and Newcastle University had done some work with the 7 Stories Museum, and it showed the importance of bringing the family alongside the child in the innovations. And Martin's already highlighted how we then incorporated that. So we're learning from others constantly. And the priority place that the Arts Council England were putting on the importance of levelling up. So that gave us a focus into some of these areas of poverty. But what we found in our large geography, that often in Newcastle, if they put out a call for funding for a creative health project, they might get lots of bids in Newcastle, but not in Middlesbrough. And that was one of the highest levels of deprivation. So going back to that driving work forward, the network then said, okay, let's put all these together and let's push forward and create something with those partners. And we literally got in a room with public health, the creative arts, the CCG, some of the commissioners, Northern Ballet, our research partners, and said, what can we do? Thank you.
So in the time we have, I'm just going to quickly flick across some of the impacts that we acquired from the research, as well as talk a little bit about how we're planning to move this forward and make this much more universally open to more young people in the Northeast. So here are the impacts on the left-hand side. This came from the research, and the research full report, which is quite a long report and in depth. I'm going to share some links in a minute about where you can find these on our websites. But what did the project do? It did what the teachers kind of see there about more engagement, more tuned in the classroom, as well as in the dance space itself. So there was a transferring of impact across the school. Parents have been really connected to the project, so they were part of all the experiences as well. So they were celebrating achievements alongside the child. The artist's impact around what we've kind of known this for a long time, or we've known this as soft outputs, but it's great to have a research team to have a look at that, to understand that. And very importantly, that the link work was there to connect that home to the school and looking at social networks for those who are most in need and most isolated. And on the right-hand side, there's a very quick word cloud from the young people. And it's always great to see the words amazing, happy and fun come to the fore as well in those things. There are some quantitative, here are some images from the project. There are some quantitative numbers that came through as well. And in the report, which we shared links to, the research methodology is in there. I can't explain that research methodology, but the researchers can do it very well in the report. And some of the outline numbers we saw that as a result of the project, young people reported improvements in creativity of, well, 74% improved, 74% reported improvements in creativity, 73% felt more fit, 66% felt more well, 64% felt more confident, and the numbers kind of go forwards and on. Another really interesting statistic was before the project started as baselining, only 30% of young people had experienced dance or taken part in dance before. At the conclusion of the project, 60% of young people reported they would like to continue to dance. So even for young people just exploring, discovering artistic output and creativity and expression, that's really crucial for me. And I thought that was really fantastic to see that. The resources, the full report, a film that shows you what STAR is all about and how it runs, with focuses on family and the teacher's perspective, are all available on our websites. And I'll drop this link into the chat afterwards. And then the last thing for me is just a bit about so what, really, and how you take a project into a program, and what Estelle said at the start there about how every child and every young person can benefit and access. So that's our challenge now. How do you take the findings from STAR 1 research, make a much more universal offer? And that's what we've been doing. So we've reached out and we're working with more schools. We've made it a much more replicable model. And by that, we mean we've looked at lower cost, but maintaining impact of what the actual engagement is. And the 6-7 points there are essentially what's happening. We've broken the year up into the shorter dance blocks so we can reach all the young people in school. We're dealing with double entry schools, so about 350 pupils per school. We're using digital resources. So the expense of going to live theatre visits, we're actually looking at how we can utilize digital experiences and bring theatre into the classroom. Evidence-based approach, so we're citing a lot of the content within the resilience framework, which you can find via the Boing Boing website, which is a really great evidence-based asset to build towards. Inclusion activities to continue learning how to dance space, so we are putting activities into the classroom as well as sending activities home, so we connect back to the family support, so the family continues that journey. We're looking at community assets, so wherever the project is based, what else is happening in that area, so it's not isolated in the school grounds, but we look into the community assets. And we're continuing to revise and find how we continue to evaluate and understand that impact, even when we can't afford the research team to be there en masse throughout. How do we actually take that forward and embed and hold on to that?
Thank you. And our final two slides, and I think the best for last, and that's definitely not me, it's the young people. So I think we should perhaps just load the 1-minute video we've got and share that, because you can see on the slides, and hopefully they'll be shared later, the policy recommendations. We all know how important it is. So it's about the inclusion in arts and creativity within health, including it in funding and having a system-wide focus. Thank you, and over to the children.
In dance, it's a really fun way to express yourself and help your mental health. It could make me nice and calm, because it's getting you fit, like when you're dancing and stuff, and to be able to like make up stories through body language and without speaking. It makes me feel like I'm in a place of happiness. It's just very calming and relaxing when we do all of the like exercises. With writing and things, it's just you're very stressed and tense, but with dancing you can be creative and you can do what you think is right. Get to show off my creativity and my skills of dancing. It's very good because you're like glad it get you more happier. Because before I go and dance, I've got super excited and it gets all your sadness out of your body and angriness out of your body. With dance, you get a break from reality and you get to relax and just let yourself be yourself. You're allowed to be yourself.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for inviting.
Thanks, Martin and Heather. Some very wise words from some very little children there at the end. I thought some of them were quite profound, but thank you both. And it's really interesting to see the themes that are coming up and again about consistency and links with the community. So, you know, it shows we're beginning to far better understand what worked. And now I'm going to ask Cara Verkerk to present to us. And Cara works for Place to Be, which is a children's mental health charity working across the country with pupils and families. And Cara is the art room project leader with Place to Be. So Cara.
Thank you. So yes, as already mentioned, Place to Be is a children's mental health charity. We work with young people, families, teachers and school communities, and have done for nearly close to 30 years now. We focus on prevention and on early intervention, offering a range of services across 600 schools across the UK. So what we do is we provide a whole school approach to mental health. This includes a range of support, including, of course, working directly with children, young people themselves, but also with parents and carers, with school leadership and supporting school staff. And creativity is woven through all areas of this work. For example, it's a cornerstone of the play therapy that we use. It allows children to express themselves and for what they create to act as a window to their inner world and what's going on inside them. But I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the art room project, and this is where we use creativity outside of the therapy room to support children's mental health, and we do this in a number of ways. So first of all, we do it through creating resources. These are resources for young people, parents, carers, or school staff to use, and I'll be sharing some links which will go out to you after our talk. All of these activities use a creative activity to explore a wellbeing theme or a mental health theme. So far, we've had close to 90,000 downloads of these activity resources and 70,000 views of them. Secondly, we deliver provisions for young people. So we do this by going into schools, delivering creative wellbeing workshops. And we're currently developing a new peer mentoring program where teens will build supportive relationships with younger peers by making art together. And thirdly, we support school staff. We skill them up and empower them to use creative sessions with a whole class or with a selected group of children and young people. So we offer them training, we create lesson guides for creative wellbeing projects, which are tied into educational wellbeing outcomes, like the PSHE or RSE curriculum, or the Scottish Health and Wellbeing, or the Welsh Personal and Social Education curriculums. So I've been asked to speak a little bit about why is it important to use creativity in schools. I think we've all kind of answered that question already, and I'm feeling really inspired hearing everyone. I guess in short, it's a fantastic way to support mental wellness in young people. It's, yeah, I agree, it's a no-brainer. Schools are places where children spend a lot of time, so we can reach them. There's a simple answer for that. It's also, as so many people have already addressed, it's a space where we can support the development of the whole child, not just their academic development, but their social and emotional selves. And we know that creative activities can help us do that. There's loads of evidence that supports this. And I think, as Alex really beautifully said, you know, relationships heal. We know that creativity can help build these kind of relationships. We know that it can help young people to learn how to do these things, which are so crucial for their later life. Another reason why creativity should be used in schools is because they're fantastic places to prevent and to spot the early signs of mental ill health. We know that half of all mental health problems are established by the age of 14. And so that's why Place to Be offers early interventions to spot mental health problems before they develop further. If I have time, I'm going to quickly tell you a really short story about a visit to a school I made recently. This was colleagues and I were visiting a primary school to deliver one of our creative wellbeing workshops, and the project was called the Weather Project, and we were using weather to think about emotional literacy. So first of all, we thought about different kinds of weather. How does it make us feel? Children didn't just have to create something. Drawing or making art can be so scary. We were also looking at videos, we were looking at artwork, we were chatting at things, or people didn't want to chat, they could just point. Over this, through making creative choices, they were able to think a little bit more about developing a broader vocabulary than just kind of happy, sad, angry for their feelings. Like one of them was talking about what's that feeling when it just starts to rain, or what kind of weather is it when you're feeling bored but you're also a bit fidgety. And over the time of them making their artwork, it was just really lovely to see how it was a way to really normalize how we can feel things so differently. One boy was sharing about how, lightning makes him feel really calm. For somebody else, it was something exciting, like something dramatic was about to happen. And so they were finding ways to safely share what they were feeling with each other, but they could also share things without using words and language they didn't want to. And then at the end of a session, a little girl came up to me to give me a note, and she wanted me to share this just with the place to be counsellor and with the adults in the school who look after her well-being. And at the beginning of the session, when I'd contracted around safeguarding, I had mentioned that I would speak to these people if I was worried about anyone. And her note said that she wanted to do more of these activities so that she could help put her depression to one side. And reflecting on it afterwards, I was really struck about how powerful this was. It was a one-off art workshop that we were delivering in the school. We didn't have the time to build a strong, trusting relationship with her. But in the space of just that short workshop, she had been able to be really absorbed in her artwork and find a way to do two really huge things, which I was really struck by. And first of all, I was thinking, wow, she was able to reflect on the process she was engaged in. I think this is really helping me. Doing this creative activity helps. And then she reached out for help. And I think this shows not only how a time-limited intervention can be beneficial in schools and that children have appetite for it, but it also shows how well established the support systems were in this school. This girl didn't know me particularly, but she did know the place to be counsellor, and she knew that the adults in the school were people that she trusted. And she wanted to share something sensitive with them about feeling depressed. And then by the end of the school day, the adults in the school were aware of this need. They were able to set up a conversation with her dad later in the week. And I could share our resources, our creative well-being activities that she could keep making at school or at home. She could do them alone or with somebody else. And a whole system of support was activated around her. And I think this is a little illustration of how creative wellbeing work, if it's really integrated into the school's existing support systems, can be a tool to spot mental ill health and for a whole school approach to mental health to flourish.
Okay, thanks very much, Cara. That's an important story to finish on, actually, because it is about that power of the relationships. It was just a one-off, but you were confident enough in the people around the pupil, the student, to know that you'd left it in safe hands. So that's good. And I know of the very long-standing work of Place to Be. It has an excellent reputation. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you. And that's all our presentations. I think they've been excellent and varied and different, and yet there's been the threads that have gone through them all, which I think the Commission is hoping to take forward in its report. But the next part is the panel discussion. I'll have you all on my screen, the panel, in a little minute, I think. And the two questions we wanted you to, a bit more conversation between ourselves about was, what more can we do to embed creativity in the education system? So that's looking forward, thinking about those barriers of which we're all aware, and how can we ensure that the benefits of creativity are available to us all, which has to be an ambition that underpins, I think, all our work. Now, I need one of you to start that conversation, but if you could put your digital hand up, or even your physical hand, and I'll be able to spot it. So who's going to start me off on perhaps the panel discussion on that? I've not got you all on my screen. Is that can I do that?
Estelle, if you click on the top right-hand view and go to gallery, I think it should work for you.
Yes, got it. Fine. And now I can see a plethora of hands. Okay, Yogesh, I'll start with you because I saw you first. Thanks.
Yeah, so I think, you know, over the years, the various initiatives have come on board. The one I'm thinking about is not music technology. Sorry, I've got music in my head. Technology and ICT, and there has been a lot of support from the government. And now these children and young people are better than adults using technology. In the same way, I'm not suggesting that everybody should learn a violin or a tabla, but perhaps there should be a similar drive, such as the one for ICT, with creativity and support for that from central government.
Okay, Sarah Williams.
Thank you. Yes, first and foremost, I know it's an obvious answer, but funding would be nice. From a purely school perspective, you know, programs like in Harmony, we are so fortunate to have it in our school, and it's something that we're committed to and invested in the long term. We have a very small financial contribution to that, and I know that they depend on a lot of charitable fundings from other areas. It would be nice if the government recognised that actually creativity should be at the core of the education system and therefore should be funded appropriately. This is my big passion and main concern around education. So funding's absolutely huge. And in terms of making sure that all schools can take part, I think the curriculum is actually pretty broad now. It does talk about the individual child and how schools are targeting their lessons to the individual rather than everybody doing the same. But I think that this also needs to be looked at. I think it might have been Sally before talking about the weighting of subjects, and actually the weighting of subjects for me is still off. We are still, unfortunately, in a society where as a head teacher, I have to be aware that my children will sit exams. They will be judged against those exams, and we as a school will be judged against those exams. And what I think needs to happen is, I'm not saying do away with exams, I'm just saying that we do have to have some form of weight shift. And we also need to have an acknowledgement that these programs actually positively contribute to children being able to do the exams in the first place because their mental health is well enough for them to sit it. So definitely a shift in the curriculum in terms of weighting and more funding. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much. And Nicola, followed by Zoe.
Thank you. Just briefly to say that from my perspective, I think that we need to be supporting all of our teachers with professional development to understand this, and we should be seeing a lot of it not as programs that are as an intervention, but as practice, which is commonly done within schools, across schools, and therefore it's a kind of shift really. Absolutely, there's a place in some of the programs and the brilliant programs that have been described now, and they make such an impact. But alongside that, I think it needs to be embedded as really good positive practice within the school week. So that might mean, you know, all children should participate in one session, from my perspective, of arts in nature practice per week outdoors, which will support their mental health, well-being, etc. But of course, we need teacher professional development to do that. So I would say alongside that, we need to make sure that it's embedded within initial teacher education, so incorporated into the core content framework, the CCF, which initial beginning teachers, early career teachers are assessed against as well. So it needs to really be embedded in the structure of training teachers, as well as this broader sense of changing the curriculum and funding as well.
That's a good point. Zoe.
Yes, thank you. I think from my perspective, I think we've got to think of two strands of making sure that creativity can become more embedded across society. The first one is kind of picking up on what Nicola was just saying around schools and teachers and teacher CPD. We've got to do better at how we are training teachers in creativity and embedding creativity in the curriculum in all sorts of different ways. You know, we see this in terms of teachers coming out the other side who have got very low confidence in terms of delivering any kind of arts in the classroom, particularly music, particularly singing. People have got their own personal things around that. So it's breaking down those barriers that people have got themselves to then empower them to teach it across the board in classrooms. But then also bringing in the experts, as Sarah said in her part of our speech, you know, bringing in those skilled experts when you need that extra level of support or teaching in those classrooms, whether they be artists, creators, composers, musicians, whatever the art form, bringing them in to support the teachers in then accessing, you know, allowing access from all children. So there's something in schools, but then I think also is absolutely critical is looking at the families, looking at parents and carers. And for me, that's got to be done through all of the, you know, early years, best start to life, the first 1001 days, looking at family hubs, children hubs, training staff who are working with families of very young children of how to embed creativity in the home, using songs, using art, using reading to create all of that environment at home where creativity and art is normal in the home as well, because then those children will come into school having built some of those skills at home and in their home lives to then support what they then receive in school. So I think it's got to be a two-phased approach within early years and all of the family hub provision, and then into the schools as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Cara.
Well, yeah, really tying into what Zoe was just saying, I completely agree, and also earlier about embedding this as good practice in for teachers from the moment they start training through to kind of cultivating that good practice. And I think then also linking that in with the government's and the senior mental health leads training that's happening in schools, so that we're not these disparate, you know, I completely agree. Us, you know, the individual programs, there's only so much we can do, but if we start creating a culture within schools, that's how we get a whole community going. That's how we can really let this reach far. And there's fantastic work happening with the senior mental health leads training. If we as well had sufficient training for school staff members to know how to safely and effectively deliver creative wellbeing activities in schools, because we know they're fantastic, but they can also open up a lot of feelings, and there are ways of using these in a way that can, you know, a trauma-informed approach or a way that just, you know, does it safely. If we had members of school staff who were trained up in this way, felt supported to do that, and then could be linked in with their senior mental health leads training, then you could, you know, you could get a fantastic blossoming whole school approach happening, and that's how people can actually implement it. Quite often we hear people who do our trainings then say, this is great, we have a strategy, what do we do now? And I think that's where the creative activities, the creative health approaches can come in to answer that question of what do we do, how do we implement this culture?
Yeah, that's almost a workforce reform plan, isn't it? Something that's at the centre of it. It's difficult to do. I'm actually going to take a question now for Sally that's come up in the Q&A in the question and answer box, and it was what we've been talking about today. How does it fit into the new cultural education plan? That's a question from one of our members of the group.
We don't know, because nothing's been announced. The plan was meant to come out last year and nothing's been announced about the plan. But I think you make an interesting points about plans and initiatives. I think we need something much more root and branch and fundamental. And writing the Arts in Schools report, we've kept thinking about how actually some of the big education developments in the 20th century came in times of crisis. The 1944 Education Act, when things get tough, it's actually a really good moment to stop and think, are we doing this right? And I think we need something really root and branch fundamental now about the purposes of our education system. And Estelle, this will resonate with you. I think we had something really good 20 years ago. It was called Every Child Matters. And I think only this morning did it occur to me that the 5 outcomes of Every Child Matters, which started with, I think, being healthy, resonate with the purposes of education that Wales has just developed for its new curriculum. I think looking at Wales, looking back to the things that have worked in the past, that have taken whole child development at the heart of an education system, these are the really fundamental things we need to do. We need to do lots of things, but I think we need to start with why are we educating children? What is education for? And I think the arts fits so beautifully into the structure Wales has developed.
Yes, there's always a bit of it wasn't invented here with England, I think. They're not always great at looking to our, you know, to our near neighbours for education systems. But I mean, my feeling is that timing is everything, and everywhere I go, I hear that wish to talk about the purpose of education, as one of our presenters said, to rebalance it. I just want to take a specific question that again has come up in the Q&A, because both Martin and Zoe mentioned the importance of working with parents and the communities. And others may want to answer this as well, but the funding for that, where does that come from? Because is it permissible if you get funding to work with children in schools, to work with the parents and the families and the community as well? Or even better, are there alternative sources of funding that might be available? So Zoe, do you want to start on that? And then I think the next one was to Martin. So just take you two, because then we perhaps need to move on at that point. Zoe, then Martin.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. From our perspective, obviously our project, we get our funding to deliver the whole project. We reach our families through the children and young people, but we do directly deliver our baby and toddler sessions, which has a direct impact on the parents. But, you know, I think the feedback that we've had from the parents and carers is that actually the impact on them is absolutely huge because of their child's involvement, because the child brings their instrument home, they practice at home, the parent comes to watch the concert, they have a concert in their own home when we do community weeks, we see them out in the community. And then, of course, they have younger siblings and the younger one comes through. So for us, the parents are an absolutely integral part of the programme delivery, yes. And that's just part of our project and our funding model.
Yeah, good. Okay. And Martin, do you just comment on that aspect of your work?
Yeah, my answer is going to kind of echo Zoe's answer. So from the outset, we were determined that we would fund the entirety of the project, and the family engagement was as important as the dance sessions in the schools. So it's not a step-by-step thing where we do, let's get the funding to do the dance first and then add on these bolt-arounds. It felt that if we didn't get the whole budget covered to actually engage the families, then we wouldn't be able to do the effectiveness in schools. And the other mantra about that is do what you do best and get other people to do what they do brilliantly. So we bring in Children North East to do the family support work because that's what they do and excel at. What I'm good at is creating dance artists to go into school to deliver a program. I'm not a family engagement specialist, so that's our collaboration model, is to bring the people who do things brilliantly together.
Yeah, that's very good. So it's a coherent package. Okay, I just want to finish the seminar now by asking each of our presenters, and it's a one only, where eventually the Commission has to present some recommendations and then campaign around them to bring about change. So just a quick from everybody, and I'll go around my screen. One recommendation that you would like us to include in the report. I'll not do that. I'm going to start at the end so you know where you come. I'm going to go backwards along the list because the screen keeps moving. Cara, what would be your one recommendation for us?
Only one. Okay, well, I've kind of sneakily snuck in my previous one about senior mental health leads and staff members linking up with that. My other one would be for all schools to have a focus on promoting positive mental health and wellbeing by using creative health and having that integrated into the curriculum. So not just the RSE or PSHE or the other curriculums, but more broadly across the entire curriculum.
Thank you. Heather?
Thank you. I think mine would be to have a system approach. The funding is challenging, and is it an education's responsibility? Is it a local authority's responsibility? Is it health's? And I think if there's a system approach and the funding is looked at across the system, that will help to address some of the challenges that you naturally buff up against. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin.
When we consider how to support young people to have the best start in life, that arts and creativity are a vital component of that.
Thank you. Alex?
That schools are supported in measures to build psychological safety within the environment, and that becomes a key assessment tool in any kind of assessment of the efficacy of the environment.
Okay, thanks, Yogesh.
So I'd like to suggest that we require, it sounds a little bit heavy-handed, but I'll say it anyway and then qualify myself, require schools to engage with their local music hub, but even if it's to say, thanks, but no thanks, we've sort of covered, I'd be happy to extend that instead of music hub, some sort of cultural initiative. I know that Sarah we're talking to the converted here, but you know we're working very hard at making sure that we provide an offer that works for all our schools. The last 4 projects that I offered: a Windrush project, an opera project, a singing project with Tenebrae, and Indonesia comes to Ealing, we did not, it wasn't to do with learning violins and pianos, it was one-off projects. And whilst we didn't sort of discriminate against the schools that work with us, equally we didn't discriminate against the ones that don't work with the music service, because not all schools can. They don't have the the demographics, and so that's what I would suggest.
Okay, thanks. Nicola.
Yeah, I would go back to reiterating my earlier point. So I think all primary age children should participate in one session of arts and nature activities per week to support their mental health and well-being, connect them to nature, and positively impact their broader engagement with learning in school, because as we've all said, it does. And to achieve this, practice should be incorporated into initial teacher education for all primary teachers.
Thank you. Sarah.
Yeah, just to earn brownie points from Nicola there, we actually do that, by the way. Our children do have their lessons outdoors, and we also do trauma-informed attachment as well, approaches in school. I think Alex will be pleased to know. Just celebrating that. I think that for me, funding is massively important. Schools, the education system is underfunded. Schools are in deficit budgets. We simply don't have the money to support wider curriculum. And I think if we got the funding right, we would be able to engage with more projects like In Harmony. In Harmony is vital. We would never not have it in our school because it is so integral to what we believe in. And I think, as much as I agree with training up teaching staff, and I think that we do need CPD, we can't lose the impact it has on children working with professionals. And that's so key and so important, and that passion that comes. So if we can get the funding right in schools to engage with professionals coming in to work with our children, that's going to make a huge, huge difference.
Okay, Zoe?
Yep. So I think that for us, we think that there is a real need for more In Harmony style projects nationally. I think, Yogesh has done a great summary around the national plan and music hubs, and music hubs have got it covered in terms of that provision for every child across the country. However, we think that there needs to be more for the most disadvantaged children, the poorest children and families in England. And it would only cost between 15 and 20 million for the government to actually then expand to have 100 In Harmonies across the country that would benefit all those children who've got the greatest need. It would be inclusive, ambitious, rooted in excellence, and it would then give that long-term neighbourhood approach that those schools and those families need. And that would be, it links in with the Marmot Review and the whole proportionate universalism of giving the most disadvantaged more, and that's what we need.
Okay, and thank you. And Sally?
I'll be very quick. I think we need a national conversation about the purposes of our education system, and I think we take Wales as the template for that.
Okay, thanks. And now, just to bring our discussions to an end, I'm going to ask Alan Howard to say a few words. Alan, without Alan, I promise you, this commission would not be here, and the whole issue of the creativity and well-being would not be on the parliamentary agenda. So I know we owe him a great debt, and to have his leadership in this area is absolutely incalculably a benefit. So, Alan, do you want to just respond to what you've heard and sign us off, so to speak?
Oh, thank you, Estelle. And we're very much up against time. I've listened to some brilliant presentations. I've learned a huge amount this morning. Much of what I've heard has been really impressive and indeed moving. You've all, between you, formulated some of the recommendations that you would like to see this review eventually making. So in a way, there's little for me to add on the obvious specifics about funding, about training, about some formal reconsideration of the curriculum. Sally's profoundly important point that education needs to be about the whole child, and that the accountabilities under which teachers operate have to be supportive of the involvement of creativity in the curriculum and the ambition to achieve the sorts of personal development that Sarah was describing in her school as a result of working with the Harmony project, In Harmony project. And Sarah, you talked about resilience, determination, confidence, self-esteem, self-expression, self-regulation, teamwork, empathy. Of course, we want children to learn to develop all those qualities and be supported to do so. And as Alex also stressed to us, children who have had very difficult experiences, very difficult starts in life, who are living in difficult circumstances, particularly need to support to recover from trauma. All that, surely any decent society would accept as axiomatic. So why isn't it the focus, and why isn't it the clear purpose of the curriculum? We have to look, I think the review is going to have to look at the structural factors that seem to get in the way of doing what every decent, sensible person and the overwhelming majority of teachers understand is absolutely essential if they are to do the work that they want to do to support children. And indeed, somebody made the point that, I think it was Nicola made the point that creativity is enormous benefit to the teachers themselves and the whole school community, not just to the children. Well, among the structural factors that I think we've got to think about are who takes responsibility. I mean, it was great to learn from Heather that the ICB up in the northeast and North Cumbria has wanted this work to be undertaken and is supporting the work that Martin is doing in Middlesbrough, I think. How widespread is that? There are 42 ICBs. How many of them have really grasped this point and the importance of it? And I think that's an opportunity for the review to try to stress and try to ensure it's stuff that we're already working on at the National Centre for Creative Health. We're working very intimately and intensively with 4 ICBs and developing relationships with more. So we've got to get all the ICBs to be committed and to know how to develop this work fruitfully. And I think that's a project that we have clearly in focus. But there's an old issue, isn't there, Estelle? In a sense, the passing of the buck of responsibility between health and education, between the two systems. Both the systems lamentably underfunded to do everything that they need to do, and a very strong temptation for them, therefore, each of them to say, well, actually, it's for you on the other side of the fence to take this on. So we've got to get an integration of responsibility, integration of resources and capacities to make sure that better things happen. How do we influence the national expectation of the education system, particularly in terms of creativity? Something that hasn't been mentioned this morning, but I think the review will find worth reflecting on, is what the expectations and demands of employers are. Because employers want children to have this emotional strength, to have these emotional capacities, to move towards an emotional maturing that enables them not only to be happy and fulfilled in their personal lives and their relationships and the whole of their home life in their communities, but also as participants in the economy. And there's this great angst that we have about our national failure in productivity, which leads to poverty, which leads to, in part, the mental health crisis from which we're all suffering. So I think, I suspect that employers do recognize that a much more holistic approach is needed, and that exams that have almost a tick box character to them, that are measuring certain specific, no doubt highly desirable, but limited skills, is insufficient. As Sarah was saying, the school is going to be judged by its performance in examinations. And she also made the point that the children's experience of creativity helps them perform better in the existing examinations. But why shouldn't the requirement set out in the existing examinations and the criteria of success take much more generous account, much fuller and more sensible account of what it is to be a rounded human being, to be a creative person? So I think these are some of the thoughts that I'm left with following a really magnificent discussion. I'm so grateful to all of you for giving not only the time, but the thought and the energy that you have to these presentations this morning. Thank you, Estelle, so much for steering the discussion and bringing us all along. I think we've learned a great deal. We're going to have another roundtable this afternoon in which we're going to look at more about how we train and develop professionals, but you've already given us a lot of guidance and useful thoughts in that respect. So many, many thanks. And I hope that our commissioners and the eventual report you will feel do some justice to what you've appealed for this morning.
Thank you very much, Alan. And my thanks to everybody who's joined the discussion this morning for their comments and questions and information you've put in the chat, but most of all to our presenters. You are busy people and you're asked to do a lot of things, and you could have been doing other things this morning. So we're very grateful for the priority that you've given this, and your words and the examples you've given, I think, give us a lot of energy to go forward and try and get this right. So you are the leaders, the pioneers, and let's hope everyone else follows pretty soon. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.